When you think of Peter Shilton, England's most capped male footballer with 125 international appearances, you probably remember his legendary saves and record-breaking career spanning over 2 decades. But behind the gloves and glory lay a devastating secret that would cost him millions and destroy everything he held dear. What his ex-wife revealed about his hidden addiction paints a picture far darker than any public controversy ever suggested. This is the tragic story of how England's goalkeeping hero gambled away his fortune and nearly lost his soul. Shilton's public troubles began long before anyone knew about the demon that was secretly consuming his life. In the early 1980s, during the height of his career, he was found with a married woman named Tina in his car at 5 a.m. in a country lane. When her husband Colin arrived to discover them partially clothed, Shilton panicked and hastily drove away, crashing straight into a lamppost in his desperation to escape the embarrassing situation. The incident wasn't just a moment of poor judgment, but a catastrophic lapse that would haunt him for years. The crash earned him a $350 fine and a 15-month driving ban, but the real punishment came from football fans who mercilessly chanted, "Shilton, Shilton, where's your wife?" at matches across the country. The public ridicule was relentless, turning one of England's greatest goalkeepers into the subject of terrace mockery. What seemed like isolated bad behaviour was actually a symptom of something far more destructive brewing beneath the surface. What nobody knew at the time was that this embarrassing incident was just the tip of an iceberg that would eventually sink his entire life. For an astonishing 45 years, Shilton battled a gambling addiction that started innocuously, as what he described as having a few bob on the horses. During his playing days, he viewed gambling as another world, a release from the pressures of professional football. He successfully compartmentalized his betting from his on-field performance, which allowed him to rationalize his behavior in dangerous ways. The gambling culture was so ingrained in football that Shilton even acted as a bookie for his England teammates, taking bets and managing odds within the squad. This normalization of betting within professional sport created a perfect storm for addiction. Because he considered himself a model professional footballer, Shilton convinced himself he was also a model gambler. This twisted logic became the foundation for decades of self-deception. The rise of online gambling in the late 1990s and early 2000s transformed Shilton's manageable habit into a daily obsession that consumed his every waking moment. No longer limited to betting shops with their deliberately blacked out windows and restricted opening hours, he could now gamble until the early hours of the morning from the comfort of his own home. The technology revolution that put casinos in their pockets for a new generation removed every traditional barrier to continuous betting. What had once been periodic visits to betting shops became constant access to virtual slot machines, online poker tables, and sports betting platforms. The instant gratification and 24-hour availability turned a controlled release into a relentless compulsion that followed him everywhere. The psychological separation he had maintained during his playing career completely collapsed under the weight of constant temptation. If you're shocked by how quickly addiction can spiral completely out of control, make sure to subscribe to hear more shocking stories from football's biggest names, and let us know in the comments what surprised you most about Shilton's hidden struggle so far. The financial devastation that followed was beyond comprehension. Shilton admits he lost millions of pounds over the course of his addiction, though he remains candidly uncertain of the exact figure due to the sheer scale and frequency of his losses. The amounts involved weren't just substantial, they were life-changing sums that would have secured comfortable retirements for entire families. In one particularly brutal example that illustrates the severity of his problem, Shilton lost 800,000 tinala to just one betting company. This wasn't accumulated over years, but represents his losses to a single operator among many he was using simultaneously. Individual months routinely saw losses of 18,000 hohenlohns, money that disappeared as quickly as his legendary reflexes had once saved seemingly impossible shots. But the real cost of his addiction extended far beyond the quantifiable financial losses. The toll on his mental and physical health was devastating and visible to those closest to him. His second wife, Steph, watched him deteriorate before her eyes, observing frequent mood swings that made him unpredictable and difficult to live with. The stress manifested physically through dramatic weight loss that made him appear gaunt and unhealthy. Most disturbingly, the addiction aged him prematurely, with Steph noting that he looked years older than his actual age. The constant anxiety and stress of hiding massive losses while continuing to bet created a cycle of self-destruction. Shilton later confessed that the mental anguish became so severe that he would feel physically sick every morning, his body rebelling against the psychological torture he was inflicting upon himself. The addiction's most devastating impact, however, was on his most important relationships. Steph's description of living with Shilton's gambling problem reveals the true human cost of addiction. She described the bookmaker as another woman in their marriage, a powerful metaphor that captures how the addiction became a competing relationship that demanded constant attention and resources. Even more dramatically, Steph likened the addiction's impact on her life to being hit by a tornado, suggesting sudden, devastating damage that left everything in ruins. This perspective highlights how gambling addiction doesn't just destroy the addict, but creates victims among family members who suffer emotional, financial, and psychological damage, despite never placing a single bet themselves. The strain became unbearable, as Shilton's gambling created what Steph described as an accelerating decline into financial crisis. The couple's life became dominated by the constant stress of mounting debts, secret losses, and the exhausting effort required to maintain a facade of normalcy while their world crumbled around them. This pattern of destruction had actually begun decades earlier with his first wife, Sue. She had demonstrated remarkable loyalty by standing by Shilton through the humiliating drink-driving scandal of the early 1980s. She had also supported him through a separate 1986 domestic disturbance that was serious enough to require police intervention at their Southampton home. However, after an extraordinary 40 years of marriage that had weathered public humiliation and private difficulties, Sue finally reached her breaking point. Their divorce in 2011 marked the end of a relationship that had survived public embarrassment and media scrutiny, but could not withstand the private destruction caused by Shilton's secret addiction. The timing of the divorce coincided directly with the worst period of his gambling-related financial crisis. The pattern of poor decision-making continued even as his personal life fell apart around him. In February 2013, more than 30 years after his first drink-driving offence, Shilton was arrested again near the home of a female friend in Colchester, Essex. This time, he pleaded guilty to drink-driving charges and received a 20-month driving ban along with $120 in fines and costs from Colchester Magistrates Court. The fact that these incidents occurred 3 decades apart suggests a recurring pattern of personal turmoil that existed independently of his gambling addiction, but was likely exacerbated by the stress and chaos it created. The timing of the second incident, coming so soon after his divorce and during the peak of his financial crisis, indicates how multiple problems were compounding each other. Adding insult to injury, Shilton's career also resulted in a landmark legal defeat that permanently changed UK tax law and continues to affect taxpayers today. The case of Shilton vs. Wilmshurst centred on a $75,000 lump sum payment he received from his former club, Nottingham Forest, when transferring to Southampton Football Club in 1982. This payment was part of a larger £325,000 transfer deal that benefited all parties involved. Nottingham Forest received a net sum of $250,000, which was far better than losing Shilton for nothing when his contract expired the following year. For Shilton, the deal secured a new 4-year contract with improved terms and a signing-on fee from Southampton. The payment from Nottingham Forest served as an inducement for him to accept the new employment opportunity. The core legal question was whether this $75,000 payment constituted a taxable emolument under Section 181 of the Income and Corporation Taxes Act 1970. The complexity arose because the payment came from a third party who had no direct interest in Shilton's performance for his new employer. Initially, both the High Court and Court of Appeal ruled in Shilton's favour, determining that the payment did not meet the criteria for a taxable emolument from his new employment. These conflicting decisions among lower courts highlighted the ambiguity in UK tax law and necessitated a definitive ruling from the highest judicial authority. However, the House of Lords delivered a devastating blow to Shilton's case in 1991. The court decisively reversed the lower court decisions and ruled in favour of HM Inspector of Taxes, concluding that the £75,000 payment was indeed a taxable emolument. The judgment applied the principle of substance over form, looking beyond who made the payment to focus on its true purpose. The court determined that the payment was a clear inducement for Shilton to enter into and accept employment with Southampton, creating a direct connection to his new job that satisfied the legal criteria for taxation. This substance over form approach meant that the intent and purpose of a payment became more important than its immediate source. The precedent set by Shilton versus Wilmshurst has had profound and lasting implications for UK tax law. The ruling broadened the scope of taxable emoluments to explicitly include inducements and benefits provided by third parties, provided they connect to an employment relationship. This precedent continues to influence tax assessments involving employee transfers and golden hello payments across all industries, extending far beyond professional sports. The turning point came in 2015, when Steph discovered the full extent of his losses. Initially suspecting an affair due to his secretive behaviour, she found bank statements revealing the devastating truth. After another costly weekend, Shilton was requesting another advance when he saw Steph watching him with despair. In that moment he realised, "What are you doing at your age? You've had 40 years to win. You're an addict." Recovery proved as challenging as any save he had made. Going cold turkey, Shilton experienced withdrawal symptoms that Steph compared to heroin addiction recovery, including restlessness, inability to concentrate, and hot sweats. It took about a year for him to fully settle, finding solace in golf as a healthier outlet. Today, Shilton campaigns with charities like Gamble Aware and Gambling with Lives, targeting the relationship between football and gambling. He argues this represents a backdoor way of snaring kids by normalising betting. He has worked with government officials to drive policy changes protecting vulnerable individuals. While Shilton has found redemption through advocacy and his recovery has lasted more than 6 years, his story remains fundamentally tragic. Behind every public controversy lay a deeper, more devastating private battle that cost him millions, destroyed a 40-year marriage, and nearly claimed everything he had worked for.